In one of the most transformative years of college football, as we depart from the college football playoff within the 4-team model, we introduced the 12-team model, and things have never been more competitive. I think my general outlook on how week one of college football went this year was the fact that these games had an NFL type of feel to them. Pretty much every primetime game looked so dominant in the event of pretty much having good defenses. So I saw a lot of athletic, aggressive defenses, and it was pretty much the offenses working through these kinks. And ultimately, when you look at the landscape of how the schedule broke down, pretty much a lot of these games ended up going under their total expected points. That's basically an inference towards really good defenses, and it surprises pretty much the general public that the offense didn't score as much. I don't think we're going to be seeing these high-rate offenses like we've seen in the past in which it's all about who wins the 45 to 38 games. It's not going to be like that anymore. Things were low scoring. So this is Trevenchy breaking down the week one of college football. We covered it all, and I just want to go over some of my favorite games that took place on Saturday, on Friday, ultimately what really caught my eye. So first things first, I saw a lot of SEC and Big Ten action, and this is still a pending take, but right now I believe that the Big Ten is better than the SEC right now. I think we'll be able to see Michigan and Texas, and I think that game will add a lot to the narrative. But ultimately, I feel like the Big Ten is a lot more competitive this year, especially adding those 4 Pac-12 schools. And I've never thought that things could get more competitive in this division, in these conferences. So within the SEC, I feel like there's a bottom half in which these SEC teams aren't as dominant, but they're competent. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Texas and Oklahoma does. Both of them looked really good. But here are some of my favorite games. So obviously, we started off Saturday with that Georgia-Clemson game. I absolutely loved it. Clemson definitely lacked a lot of offensive identity. Georgia exploited it, and I do feel confident that Georgia is going to be a top 10 team going into this year. They didn't even have Trevor Etienne in. Their entire offense looked amazing. It was a little slow in the first half, but they worked through those kinks, and ultimately Kirby Smart really broke through the adversity, and I loved what Georgia put out on film. I loved what Ohio State put out. I loved what Oregon was struggling a little bit. Ultimately, they figured it out towards the end. I do love how they're looking. Interested to see how Texas looks against Michigan. But some other of my favorite games was the Notre Dame Texas A&M game. That was the college game day feature. And I loved that game just because of the history with quarterback Riley Leonard with Notre Dame, who was previously at Duke, and Coach Elko, who was previously at Duke. And Coach Elko now is the coach for Texas A&M. You can tell he's going to have some work on his hands. He's going to have to build a program from the ground up. They are not the same A&M. They got the talent like A&M, but they are not the same A&M. Their identity is definitely pending. It'll be cool. And I honestly think Notre Dame, they're a good team. They just have such a weak schedule. I think they're going to make the playoff just because they have that weak schedule. Ole Miss looked really good. Another surprising game, I was shocked to see Penn State finally break through. They look like a competent offense this year, mainly because they have a new offensive coordinator. He's nuts. Him and Drew Aller definitely are going to ball this year. They looked very explosive. I can't wait to see how they compete with the top-tier Big Ten schools. Ultimately, my other favorite games were, it was really cool seeing the Miami-Florida game just because Cam Ward obviously had open eyes to see what he could do. Previously, a really good quarterback on Wazoo, but now that he's best friends with Shador, so I kind of figured he was going to piece it together and be a competent college football quarterback, and he showed it. He balled out. He exploited Florida's lack of identity, and I think Florida has a rude awakening ahead, not only having one of the hardest schedules, but ultimately being that doormat of the SEC. I definitely see that happening down the road. Some other things that I'd love to acknowledge. Matt Raiola with Nebraska looked phenomenal. I think my favorite game going into next week, not just including the Texas-Michigan game because of the implications behind which conference is better, but I love Nebraska versus Colorado next week. Colorado could easily lose to Nebraska. Nebraska could easily lose to Colorado. Both of those teams are kind of the same in which they have these high-powered offenses. Their quarterbacks are phenomenal. Now it's just going to see who plays better defense on that game. that is going to be my game to watch for week 2. Some other features that I absolutely loved. I pretty much liked a lot of the Big 12 stuff. The only teams that really struggled in the Big 12 was Houston and the BYU. So that's why you can't really say that we're going to be the worst team in the Big 12. I think ASU definitely is an average or above average Big 12 contender, and it's going to be interesting to see how they ball out. But it was shocking to see UNLV completely destroy Houston. That was hard. That was hard to watch. Some other games that I absolutely loved. I definitely liked a little bit of honestly, I loved the USC LSU game. That was a primetime NFL game. I'm really excited to see Miller Moss go into the Big Ten to see what he can do. More importantly, I think LSU is going to bounce back. But my take, the Trevenchy take after week 1, and obviously this is going to be changing, ever changing for the entire season. But I think the SEC only produces 3 teams in the playoff this year. I think it's going to be Georgia, Alabama, and Missouri. And I think Big Ten will represent with 4. I think they're going to put out an Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, and USC. And ultimately, that is what's going to imply that Big Ten is a better conference just because they're going to put out some more teams. But I see those 7 teams, and then I see the Big 12 putting out a good 3 teams. And then ultimately, you have your out-of-conference, your non-Power 5 conference team, and then you have your one ACC team, which I think is going to end up being Miami because Florida State now is 0-2. So we'll see how Cam Ward does in terms of consistency. That is his biggest problem. So we'll see if he's able to maintain his composure the rest of the season. But ultimately, I do see 3 teams from the SEC, 3 teams from the Big 12, 4 teams from the Big 10, an ACC school, and an out of Power 4 conference, one of the 5 conferences from college football. But ultimately, I think this college game day was wonderful. I was running multi-screens pretty much all day. It was phenomenal, especially in the middle of the day when I got to watch Matt Raiola ball out, and then Dylan Raiola ball out. Then I got to see Ohio State, and holy crap. People can say that Travis Hunter is the best college football player right now, but Jeremiah Smith looked remarkable. He looked so dominant. A 50-50 ball to him is always going to be 95-5. I love to see Jeremiah Smith ball out. Will Howard looked very composed. I don't feel like he's really going to be an issue. I'm interested to see what happens when adversity comes their way. But I think Ohio State can beat an Oregon. I think they can obviously beat a Penn State, and I think they'll compete very well with Michigan. Michigan's problem was they played with their food with Fresno State. Mikey Keene did not piece it together. I thought he is a really good quarterback, but I just think he could have done more to help his case. And pretty much it was just the pressure from Michigan. They had too much defense on him. So Mason Graham is just going to be remarkable this year, and their cornerback, Will, he looks ridiculous. But ultimately, that's my take, the Trevenchy take of week 1 college football. I absolutely loved the experience. I'm so glad we had it back. College game day was phenomenal. Someone kicked a field goal to win $50,000. He made it on the second try. I think those kind of things are pretty much telling of what college football is full of. Like, we grow up on these shows. We grow up waking up on Saturday morning after 5 days of elementary school, of middle school, and we just look forward to these game days. So ultimately, I can't wait to see Big Noon Saturday next week, and I can't wait to see how our Sun Devils do, especially playing a Mississippi State SEC school, in which we've never beaten an SEC school in our program history. So this is really the ESPN coverage that we deserve, and ultimately I am very excited for week 2 of college football. So that's your Trevenchy take, guys. Thank you so much for watching.